Hello, my name is Albert Garcia, and I'm a librarian with the Contra Costa County Library System, and I'm very happy to be hosting this week with 350 Contra Costa on a series of programs. We had a program on Monday, Electrifying Your Building, and that program was recorded and is now available on our YouTube channel. This program, as well as tomorrow's program, What is a Carbon Sink, will also be recorded and posted to our YouTube channel. We also have a survey that we've dropped into the chat. The survey is about climate change and how it has affected your lives. It's a very short survey. And if you take that survey, you'll be entered into a drawing to win a t-shirt. We're going to have the drawing at the end of the week, so please include your email for that drawing. Just to let you know, up in your top right-hand corner, you will have an option to go from grid view to speaker view. We are going to be using a spotlight today. And so if you switch to speaker view, that'll allow you to see the speaker and the presentation. At the end of the presentations, we will be doing a Q&A, so we'll take the spotlight off and you can switch that back to grid view if you'd like. And in just a minute, I'm going to hand it over to our host from 350 Contra Costa. But before that, I do want to talk a little bit about our library services. The Contra Costa County Library is happy to connect you with our resources, services, and materials at all 26 of our branches. Access more than 1 million physical items, including international language collections, and thousands of digital materials 24/7 at ccclib.org. Visit any library to use our public computers, printers, and free Wi-Fi. You can also visit one of our branches with laptops for on-site use or check out a Wi-Fi hotspot for 3 weeks. Contra Costa County Library's adult literacy program trains and supports volunteer tutors to deliver basic literacy instruction to adults throughout the county. Visit our website and sign up for a digital library card today. Thank you very much, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to 350 Contra Costa.
Hello, I'm Jackie, and I'm going to be talking to you today about climate solutions and the work that environmental activists do to advance these solutions and to stop fossil fuels. All right, everybody see that? Okay. And if we, there we go. So 350 is a grassroots movement that advocates for healthy climate, sustainable clean energy, and environmental justice for all. We educate, organize, legislate, and act for the future we all want. We have 9 chapters around the Bay, from Napa and Sonoma to the Silicon Valley, and we are a completely local organization run by volunteers and a small staff. So what does our name mean? Why 350? When our parent organization, 350.org, was started by Bill McKibben in 2007, we had just surpassed 350 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. 350 parts per million was determined to be a red line, the highest concentration of CO2 to preserve our environment and our way of life. It is the atmosphere in which present life and ecosystems evolve. Well, we have shot past that level to 420 parts per million, a level approximately 50% higher than pre-industrial times and the highest level in over 2 million years. So this is climate science in a nutshell, the quick version. It's warming, it's us, we are absolutely sure. It is bad, but we can fix it. So this slide is showing the biggest sources of greenhouse gases. You'll see the gases listed over on the left side, but what's important is where these gases come from in our daily lives. So they come from a variety of human activities, including extracting and burning fossil fuels, agriculture, clearing forests, fertilizers for crops, methane from decomposing waste in landfills, raising livestock, and many industrial products such as refrigerants, cement, and steel production. I do want to mention that there are also natural emissions from wildfires and vegetative decomposition, and the thawing permafrost. And ocean sources can also be significant sources of greenhouse gases. But the feedback loops from climatic warming are increasing these natural emissions. And I think we all see this happening in our daily lives. So how do we know that this science is true? Well, it's pretty much unanimous at this point. Most of the global warming since 1950 has been caused by human emissions of greenhouse gases. Scientists have been studying climate change for decades, and we know that there is pretty much global consensus on this. The United Nations created the International Panel on Climate Change in 1988, and it has produced 6 reports reviewed and approved by scientists and governments from 195 countries, which make up the Conference of Parties. This slide is the billion-dollar weather and climate disasters that occurred in the US in 2021. I used a bit of an older slide here because in 2021 in the Bay Area, of course, we were really greatly affected by wildfires and also some severe flooding in January. Locally, this year, we had a cooler summer thanks to our marine layer, but we know that globally, the world experienced a very hot summer, as evidenced by the Canadian wildfires and the record-breaking heat in September. This year, in 2023, we just broke this record, an average of $20 billion climate disasters in the last per year, and we've already hit $23 billion climate disasters, and we still have several months to go. Think about how you might have been affected by some of these climate extremes, perhaps with smoky skies, power shutoffs, or flooding. So the cost of carbon is something that we feel in many ways in our lives. But aside of the environmental costs, there is social, political, and economic costs. Climate change is the #1 threat to every economy in the world. It's clear we must address our fossil fuel emissions because we are paying the price in every way, and we can't keep up with mitigation or adaptation at this scale of impacts. I'm going to take a minute here to talk about environmental racism and climate justice. So if we look at this cocktail glass on the right, you'll see that the dark green band at the top, well, that is representing the richest 10% of the global population, and their emissions are represented in that top green band, and they contribute to 49% of the emissions. At the very bottom of the glass, the dark green, the poorest 50% of the world population contributes to only 10 or 12% of global emissions. So that poorest part of the population, they contribute very little to rising CO2 levels, yet they suffer the most from climate disasters, famine, and disease. They have few resources for mitigation or adaptation, and they have no power to change the emissions or policies of powerful nations like the US, who have impacted their environment. In short, they have the least recourse politically, financially, or geographically. So that's a hard truth that we, the rich Western nations, and especially the US with a large history of pollution, we actually inflict climate change on poorer nations. We don't mean to do this, but I do think it gives us an extra responsibility to help fix things. So when we burn fossil fuels, we create air pollution, and we also create heat. And this heat also increases air pollution. When we talk about air pollution, we're usually talking about greenhouse gases and tiny little particles called particulate matter. I will call that PM from now on. And as I said before, I want to emphasize that we know that human activities are responsible for 80 to 90% of the increase in greenhouse gases over the last 150 years. So we have great health effects from this air pollution that we've created. Particulate matter, also commonly known as soot, are these tiny little particles. If you look into the bottom right-hand corner here, there's these little pink beads. These represent the particulate matter in microns, and this is a magnification of a human hair and a grain of sand. So these particulate matter particles are so tiny, they can be absorbed through they're not screened out by our lungs, and they're absorbed into our bloodstream, into our cells, and they can pass through many barriers in our body. These are the main cause of health impacts from pollution. The most worrisome things for me here are the effects on infants and even babies before they're born. These particulate emissions can pass through the placenta and affect developing babies. This is the global number of deaths from air pollution in 2017. You'll see the numbers are just huge. And the point here is that everyone on Earth is affected by air pollution. It's something that we can't escape. And even if you live far away from industrial sources or a polluted city, you might still be suffering from health impacts due to the travel of pollutants, of air pollutions. And again, we saw this summer in how the smoke from the Canadian wildfires blew to the East Coast. So the good news is that climate solutions are health solutions. We know that fossil fuels caused 8.7 million deaths globally in 2018. That is another staggering number. And this science was just released in 2022 because research is getting better and being able to attribute the effects of air pollution directly to people. There's a success story here on the right in that China cut its fossil fuel emissions in half. Of course, China has been known for its terrible air pollution and smoky skies. And in doing that, it's estimated that they saved 1.5 million lives in China and actually 2.4 million worldwide. So air pollution affects everybody everywhere in the world. Oh, I'm not, there we go. There, now let's talk about climate solutions. So this is the good news. If we stop fossil fuels, we immediately reduce greenhouse gases and pollution, and we increase environmental and human health. The climate solutions are really simple. There's things that you have all been hearing and reading about: solar, wind, building electrification, electric vehicles, and battery storage. And to a lesser extent, hydroelectric power, geothermal power, and nuclear, in that it has no greenhouse gas emissions, but there are other health and monetary problems with nuclear. So we are living in the great energy transition, and we have the solutions to slow climate change. They are available now. We have the technology. The obstacle we have is opposition from fossil fuel and corporate interests that want to keep the status quo. These corporations have enormous political influence and oppose the clean energy transition. Even so, it's pretty much inevitable because of the great affordability of clean energy. Electrification is saving us money, and it's going to save us more. Next year, solar and wind energy will be the cheapest energy on Earth. If we look closely at this slide, let's see, do I get a cursor? I hope you can see my cursor. This very sharp diagonal from the top to the bottom represents the decrease in cost of solar energy. And this green lower down, this green diagonal, is the decrease in cost of wind energy. So if you also look, you'll see that nuclear prices have been going up. It's really expensive, and it takes decades and decades. There's a lot of cost overruns when we build large-scale nuclear. So we don't anticipate that a lot of that will be coming online when we have such good, cheap sources available in solar and wind. So what we're going to get is a clean energy grid, and that means zero fossil fuel emissions. This graph is, the top of the graph is showing a baseline of where we're at now. And in the next 3 decades, all of these greenhouse gases are going to decrease dramatically. So we're moving toward 100% reductions of all of these greenhouse gases as we clean up our grid. And this renewable energy will avoid 1.2 trillion in health and environmental damages. And basically, it's kind of like that credit card commercial. It is priceless benefits to the climate and to our health. And along with solar and wind, we need utility scale battery storage. Battery tech is advancing super quickly. Batteries are going to be everywhere in our lives in the future. There will be batteries attached to common appliances. There will be smart readers and battery backups to improve reliability of our appliances and our energy grid. This is a picture of Moss Landing, the power plant there, which is now a giant battery energy storage plant. So with all of this electrification, we can unhook our gas appliances and work on building electrification. Rewiring America put out a Billion Machines report, which breaks down the math behind the urgent opportunity, outlining how many electrified furnaces, water heaters, cars, clothes dryers, and infrastructure machines it will take us to get to net zero emissions. And the manufacturing of all of these machines will create many jobs. Brenna, who's here and will be speaking later, she did a great presentation on this on Monday, and the recording of that is available through the library, and we will be giving the link later on in the program. Electrification of transport. Transportation is the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions, and in California, that's 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions, a pretty whopping number. And Newsom signed an executive order in 2018 that mandates that we all move to electric vehicles. So in 2035, we will no longer sell gas-powered vehicles in the United States. This reduces our emissions, and electric cars cost 60% less to run, so it will save you money, and it will help people's health, and it will help save us money in health costs, again, from the effects of air pollution. So how do we implement these climate solutions? How do we phase out fossil fuels and scale up production of clean, sustainable energy? We want to talk about doing that faster. And that's part of why today I thought we'd include a section on advocacy work. So we all know how the fossil fuel industry tried to make us feel responsible for our own carbon footprint and our own duty to recycle, and that we are the problem. But of course, what we really need to do is not have bad choices. We need to have all good choices to clean up our environment. And how we do that is with policies. I just want to point out here is a protest we attended in Sacramento to stand up to big oil. So I want to give you an example of a great policy that had a lot of health benefits for our society. This is the Clean Air Act, which has been amended and revised several times. It was revised in 1990 under President Bush to address acid rain, urban pollution, and toxic air emissions. And in 2022, it was amended to include a greenhouse gas reduction fund, which gives the EPA oversight over $27 billion in grants to green banks. So in 1990 to 18 on this slide, you'll see these greenhouse gases just dramatically dropped in emissions because of the Clean Air Act, because we regulated, because we set standards, and we had national oversight of that. Some of the lines on the bottom that remained pretty steady have to do with particulate emissions and ammonia and nitrogen fertilizers. So, talk about great policies and what's happening right now. These are headlines from major newspapers about the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, that we passed in August 2022. This is the largest, most comprehensive climate change and emission reductions bill ever. It just passed its first birthday, so it's kind of ramping up and getting going. And this was passed by the Biden administration, and we have a lot more good legislation coming. So in 1990 to 2008, agency spending on climate solutions pretty much stayed steady. But then we really passed a few good bills: the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act and bipartisan infrastructure law, the CHIPS and Science Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act. These policies are putting $80 billion into climate solutions. So here's a little deeper look at the funds in the bipartisan infrastructure law. The ones in green here show the areas that are related directly to helping solve the climate crisis, and they work in conjunction with the IRA. So public transit and power grids, I mentioned passenger transportation, public transportation on rail, electrification of our grid. So there's a lot of things in here that are going to help us reach our goals. So the projected economic benefits of the IRA are direct household savings, the creation of more than 9 million new jobs in the next decade related to producing the machines we need and putting in the infrastructure. And by 2030, at least a 4% reduction in annual national energy expenditures. So 4.1 trillion, it's a really big number to get your head around. And this is the amount of capital that's going to be spent in the next decade on solar and wind, carbon capture and transport, hydrogen, and consumer technologies. Again, these are producing the machines we need under consumer technologies. We have new programs that are funded by these laws. The green hydrogen hubs and carbon capture, utilization, and storage, and the Natural Carbon Storage Act. So each of these topics could be an entire hour presentation in themselves. I do want to point out that tomorrow, Alana is going to be giving a presentation on what is a carbon sink, and that will describe some methods of carbon storage, natural and not so natural. It will also talk about the Montezuma Wetlands project that is being planned that touches Contra Costa County, and the plan there is to pump a lot of CO2 gas into a wetland and hope it stays there for forever, basically. So environmental groups have a lot of questions about that, a lot of concerns. We're concerned really that it's another greenwashing technique of the fossil fuel industries. What we do like is this natural carbon storage, 30% of lands by 2030. And in California, that is now law. We passed a law on that in the last legislative session. It is a federal initiative that the Biden administration is promoting. So climate policies work. We need to regulate, legislate, and adjudicate. Climate organizations help do with this. We help craft and pass good policies. We help oppose bad policies. And we work on many levels when we do this. So now I'm going to talk about what environmental organizations do. This is a youth march organized by an Antioch high school against oil drilling. And it's because they were drilling right near the high school and by a Kaiser hospital in Antioch. You might have heard of this, no drilling where we're living. So we work directly with local people. We create big coalitions. Our group, 350, is often a partner to these other organizations rather than the lead, but we hope to supply people on the ground to go to the rallies. We provide financial assistance and logistical support for many of these things. What was really nice about this rally is it was led by high school students themselves. Locally, there is so much we can do in our own neighborhoods. We can pass climate emergency resolutions. We can review climate action plans. We have passed electrification reach codes, which accelerate electrification in our own towns. And right now, there are 76 cities and jurisdictions in California that have passed electrification reach codes. There are other even more local things. In Lafayette, for instance, they just banned gas-powered leaf blowers because they not only are they noisy, they release a lot of particulate emissions. We do a lot of public education, and we have some fun events too. Like you might have heard of the Walnut Creek Eco Fest last year that we helped sponsor and organize in collaboration with Sustainable Walnut Creek, Sustainable Contra Costa, Climate Reality, and many other groups. It was a really good event. There was also an Earth Day event, and this is, of course, our Sustainability Week event for Walnut Creek right now. And next year, there will be some more events. So it's, you know, we think of the EPA as the agency regulating everything, but really a lot of regulation happens at a local level. And things that happen at a local level, well, we're constituents, we live here, we can go lobby, we can meet the people who make the rules. These are just some of the agencies that we work with in our climate work. The Bay Area Air Quality Management District, the California Energy Commission, the Public Utilities Commission, and the Air Resource Board. We are constantly working with them, sometimes supporting them, sometimes opposing them, to try and come up with better ways to implement clean air solutions. At the state level, I would say that legislation is our bread and butter of the work we do. We are right here in this picture. We're out lobbying in front of Senator Glazer's office on some legislation on referendum reform and also lobbying for electric school buses. I'm happy to report that both of these passed, and we know that our lobbying made a difference. We had heard that Senator Glazer was not going to support these initiatives, these laws. And when we went out, stood around with signs, we ended up going into the office to talk to the staffers, and we were able to set up a lobby meeting the following week. If legislation sounds like something you're interested in, you can join 350 Bay Area for a training session in late January to learn how to research and follow legislation, and you would do that as part of our legislative team. This year, we passed a lot of we followed a lot of successful legislation, I would say. 13 bills we supported passed, 11 were signed into laws, 2 were vetoed, and 15 bills became 2-year bills. We also send out a newsletter, which gives you updates on climate legislation as well as other local activities that we're supporting. So the power of climate action is that we can change the future. We can influence people. We can help decision makers make good decisions. So when we talk about reducing climate change, people say, doesn't it feel hopeless or isn't it doomed? And that's not how we think. We think that there is so much to do that we need more people to help us. We could be working on climate solutions all day and making the world a better place. But there's only so much we can do because we need more volunteers. And yes, an individual can make a difference. And I can tell you that because I feel like I have been involved in so many campaigns that have really had success. Now, you might say, well, what is it that I would want to work on? And that's a good reason to join a climate group. There are groups for every single person. You can pick by location or region, which is what 350 is. It's really a local climate group, by your age, by your faith, by your neighborhood, by specific cause or interests like rivers or forests. You could even do climate action within a book club or a bridge club. So I do want to encourage everyone here to think about what you could do to join a climate group and stay up on what's happening around you. Environmental organizations all follow similar campaign strategies. When we go to tackle a problem, there's a lot of planning, advanced planning involved. As a local group, 350 Contra Costa, we are kind of like the foot soldiers, the people on the ground who implement this by speaking and going to meetings. So if you're thinking what you can do and you join a group, the group will perhaps put out a petition. And in this scenario, we're looking at shutting down a pipeline. So we educate the public. The petition itself is an educational tool. We get out in public to inform people of what we're doing. And we keep building our support base, again, with coalition and the public. We meet leaders, the movement grows, we escalate tactics. And as we do this, time goes on and we find that we can change public opinion and influence leaders. And hopefully we have a win at the end. It's not always a win, but in California, we certainly are doing better than in a lot of states. So I want you to know that your climate actions make a difference. When you get all of these emails from people asking you to sign a petition or send a letter or make a call or write to an official, that's actually what we need. That is how the sausage gets made. It takes thousands of individual actions to influence policy. It takes thousands of individual actions at every step of the way to get where we want to go. And some of these things just take a minute or two, like signing a petition or even sending emails, because we will usually give you a write-up. And you're taking a climate action right now by coming to this educational webinar. So thank you. Here's an example of a campaign that's been going on for a decade. This is 350.org, our international founder, their organization of Stop the Money Pipeline campaign. And what it does is it seeks divestment from fossil fuels. So directly from banks. Here it says no more dirty four. These are four of the banks that are the biggest supporters of fossil fuels: JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America. Can't remember the other one right now. And we're exposing a problem. It's a problem of, thoughtlessness, really, for some people. So for instance, we also ask for individuals to divest from dirty banks. We ask insurance companies to divest so they don't support fossil fuel industries. Oh, sorry. Case study. Here's a case study in reducing refinery pollution. And this is one we're really proud of because it happened right here in Contra Costa County. You may know that we have several refineries locally for right now. This picture here is a picture of pollution plumes. This is that particulate matter that I told you was so bad for our health. This is how particulate matter spreads away from the refineries. So it impacts frontline communities and adjacent communities, and it has very direct impacts on health. So we sought to campaign CARB, the California Air Resource Board, to pass a rule requiring a wet gas scrubber. A wet gas scrubber takes this particulate pollution out of the refinery and stops it from entering the community. We worked with a huge coalition of youth and health professionals, and we used all of the tactics that I showed you in the previous slide: comments, press releases, letters to the editor, opinions. And the great news is that it won. And here's a press rally. This was led by Communities for Better Environment and the Center for Biological Diversity over there on the far left. And this was a great, I must say, Climate Health Now and Physicians for Social Responsibility. That's all the people in the white coats here. I will add that civic engagement is crucial to all of the climate work we do. We must defend democracy and get out the vote and defend people's rights to vote. So I will thank you if you're maybe not doing climate work and you're doing voter work. Well, that is really just as important. So in closing, I want to say that climate advocacy is really pretty easy on the small scale of individual actions. And if you're interested in doing more and moving from just a concerned citizen to somebody who's making change, please, we encourage you to find a group, any group. It doesn't need to be 350, because many of the groups are doing the same work. We all are working together. Get a newsletter, follow what's going on, follow the action alerts. And you might think, well, I don't know anything about this, but I'll tell you that your skills and your time are very valuable to us. We are all volunteers. I'm presenting this to you today as a volunteer, and I am an ecologist by training, but we have accountants and real estate professionals and people with all different kinds of skills, and literally people who are tech savvy, people who are work on designs. You have a lot of skills that can help us and can help change these policies. So we hope that you will take a next step after this webinar and do a little more to help us, because we believe that change is possible and that you can be one of those change makers. As Al Gore said, it is an absolute privilege to do this work because there is still time to make a difference. Thank you. And now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Brenna. Brenna is going to give you a presentation, another kind of in-depth presentation on the Spokane Expo of 1974. And this is a case study in climate activism and how people change their community. So Brenna, you want to share your screen? There we go.
You just move that little box. Okay.
There, you're good.
Everyone can see it? Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to share a true story with you today, and I hope that it will highlight the compounded success that's possible through working collaboratively. So in 1974, the World's Fair was held in Spokane, Washington, and the theme was celebrating tomorrow's fresh new environment. And I was born in late 1973, and according to my mother, I attended the fair almost every day from May to November during my daily stroller walks. She'd purchased a pass for the entire season. So my dad was an Air Force man who was based out of Fairchild Air Force Base, which is just outside of Spokane. And, when he and my mother met, married, started a family, but due to his job, we moved every few years. So we left Spokane before I turned 3. Obviously, I don't really remember seeing the World's Fair, but I heard a lot about the event growing up because as we moved from place to place, wherever we were living, my mom talked about Spokane all the time because she was homesick. And Expo 74 was one of her very favorite stories. Spokane had been a major railroad town with the train going right through the center. and cutting off businesses. By the late 1960s, it was just creating a mess. Car traffic was daily interrupted and frustrated by the train traffic. In fact, locals often referred to the train trestles as the Chinese Wall in reference to the Great Wall of China. The nearby river was severely polluted for the same reason and clogged with refuse from the train industry. And the downtown area, frankly, was loud, smelly, and messy due to the trains. So they decided to clean it all up and host a World's Fair, and they called it the International Exposition on the Environment. The train traffic was diverted away from the center of town, and the downtown area was dramatically cleaned up. So in this picture, you can see that all that remained of the old train depot is the clock tower. With a population of only 170,000 people, Spokane was the smallest town to ever hold the World's Fair. I think that's still the case today. And they brought in 5.2 million visitors. It was a smashing success, and not just financially. Spokane still benefits from many of the changes made for that one event. So the gondola that was built to showcase the beautiful river and waterfalls that had been cleaned up from the railroad pollutants, it's still there. The garbage goat, sculpture created by a local nun just for the expo and hooked up to a vacuum system, it's still there and sucking up any nearby litter. Children were encouraged to feed the goat any trash that was lying around. And I credit the garbage goat with training all the local kids, not just not to litter, but if they do see trash, to pick it up. And when visiting Spokane, you'll notice that it's a clean town. And I'm well acquainted with these items and more because our family moved back when I reached junior high. And the garbage goat is still popular with kids and adults too. So I think that even though I don't remember the actual event, the stories that my mother told me really shaped my attitude. I came to believe that environmental stewardship was really important and that anything was possible. So when I took an environmental science class in high school, where I was first introduced to global warming, the whole issue seemed entirely solvable. At that time, the repercussions were thought to be further away, and we were thought to still have plenty of time to make the necessary changes. So most importantly, we just needed to change our habits and be more conservative with our resources. So during high school, I worked at a record store, which we still call it a record store, but by that time we were selling the modern tapes and CDs. The plastic tape came in a plastic case, which was then wrapped in plastic cellophane. And CDs were even worse. They came in a plastic case that was then put into a long box that was over twice the size of the CD. And then all of that was wrapped up in cellophane. So putting these items, these pretty small items by comparison, into our big plastic shopping bag for customers to carry from the door to the nearby car seemed kind of ridiculous. So I would ask each customer, do you need a bag for this? And most of the time they'd just laugh and say no. But as you know, the news about climate change just kept getting worse. The timeline kept getting closer and being moved up. The asks started getting bigger. It was no longer enough to forego a bag, sun-dry the laundry, or shut off the water while brushing your teeth. But I still believed that our individual actions could solve it. So when my friend, who was a math teacher, explained to me how installing solar could save an immediate monthly savings, despite what the utility company was saying at the time, my husband and I installed solar the next day. I mean, almost the next day. Now, this was our first house, and our mortgage was still difficult to bear. I drove a 1973 Dodge Dart, and my husband's beater had no working air conditioning. And while the windows could be rolled down, they could not be rolled up. So, lucky he had an engineering background, he was able to get those windows back up. But once they were up, we had to keep them up no matter how hot it was outside with no AC. Nonetheless, we did, in fact, see immediate savings from solar and a little more wiggle room in our monthly budget. And I believed from our experience that it wouldn't be long before everyone got solar and climate change would be solved. And that's not what happened. A few years after we'd installed solar, I remember listening to the radio with my 2 young kids in the car as the news said that climate change could no longer be stopped. It was already here. How was that possible? We had so many solutions already within reach. Was this really the future we were giving to our children, to all the children in the world? But over time, I began to see some alarming details that I'd missed previously. And these details seemed way beyond my control. For example, I learned that half of the world's plastic, which is a fossil fuel product, had very recently been produced. Over half the world's plastic produced in just the last 10 years, and that most of it's not really recycled for various reasons, despite our putting it in the blue bin. And we're continuing to increase plastic production despite the climate crisis. Here's just a few examples that you may relate to, where you see a ubiquitous amount of packaging. It's often done to fool people into buying something that they might otherwise feel is too expensive. And it seems to be everywhere and increasing. I learned that unshaded streets and roadways increase heat and can raise the nearby temperatures by as much as 25 degrees on a really hot day. Think about all the roads we have in America, in the world, most of them unshaded, and the warming effect of that. On the other hand, the warming effect can be mitigated with a beautiful tree-lined street. Now, I can plant a tree to shade the street in front of my house, and that's great, but that's just a drop in the bucket of the water we need to put this fire out. And speaking of trees, I learned that the number of native tree saplings has decreased dramatically in recent decades because, like people, plants may need to migrate to cooler areas, only they can't do it fast enough because they don't have any legs. Essentially, I learned that there was a lot that was way beyond my personal control, way beyond any of our personal control, and that the only chance of saving humanity was to work cooperatively. So I had to rethink my perceptions. And when I look back at the Expo story, I still think that environmental stewardship is important, and I still believe that anything is possible. However, I think that I may have overlooked the importance of working together. Expo 74 was a massive undertaking, and it was successful, but it wasn't accomplished by just one individual. In fact, most people were initially very critical of the whole idea. It was too expensive. It was too much change. It wasn't practical. The truth is, the biggest challenge in making Expo 74 a reality was finding common ground with various interests in order to move forward. It required everyone to pitch in various ways and at various levels and to work through their differences. So let me just describe a few of the challenges that had to be overcome. Let's start with funding. That's a typical challenge. So initially, the city was looking just to fund the cleanup of the area and build a big park. 2 bond measures were put forth by the voters, and while most voters were in favor, they were just under the threshold needed of 60%. Local businesses reluctantly agreed to tax themselves because there seemed no other way to get the area cleaned up, which they realized would really be good for business. So they raised a lot of money, but it still wasn't enough. And that's when Spokane started thinking about using funds for the city's upcoming centennial celebrations. But the feasibility studies determined that it would be still too expensive with few long-term benefits. Now, this is where I think most of us might have scaled down, but they realized, in fact, that the answer lay in thinking much, much bigger. And a World Expo would give them access to both state and federal dollars and allow them to create big and lasting change. The photos in the picture are of the Opera House on the left and the Convention Center on the right. The state paid $10 million, that would be over $64 million in today's dollars, in order to build the Opera House and the Convention Centers, which were used for the state's pavilion during the exposition. And then the governor sold it all to the city for $1 after the World's Fair was over. That's a pretty good deal. Okay, there we go. Real estate, that was the next challenge. So Spokane did not actually own the land that they sought, and it wasn't for sale. Neither could the city afford the privately owned land that they desired in order to clean it up and transform it into a park. The property was valued at $18 million, which would be the equivalent of $125 million today. Many Spokane businesses had contacts with industry leaders in the railroad industry back east who were transporting their goods, and they were able to convince them to donate the land to the city, because essentially cleaning up downtown would be good for business, which would be good for their transporters as well. Even the ever-popular garbage goat came with a challenge. Local dairy goat farmers protested the installation of the garbage goat sculpture as insulting and debasing. They thought it was misleading and wanted the public to be properly educated that goats required quality feeding. But this too was solved. Expo organizers added a nearby plaque stating that with the finest of hay and grains, a goat could produce 3 to 7 quarts of the ultimate milk for the family, and described the goat as the most economical and ecological animal. So I wouldn't really say that the story of Expo 74 is about compromise, because that sort of indicates that people accepted a little less in order to get at least something accomplished. This is the opposite, right? They did the opposite. They increased their vision, made it bigger, increased their goal. They got creative. They worked with more and more people who weren't initially on board, and they worked very hard to make it a lasting success for everyone. You know that old saying that those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. But our history also offers us some amazing examples about what we can accomplish when we think really big and work cooperatively. I came to see that if my goal was for a clean, healthy world for my children and their children, for all children, then my individual actions were never going to be enough. And meanwhile, the stakes were getting much, much bigger. So in 2020, I attended Climate Reality Training, the program founded by former Vice President Al Gore to train people how to get involved in working with others to address climate change. Today, well over 30,000 people from all over the world have completed this program and are working together to effectively bring about the necessary changes for a strong and healthy environment. And shortly after, I joined 350 Contra Costa and began working with other people in the Bay Area who also care about the environment. I'd like to close with a picture of the logo for Spokane's Expo. It's a stylized Mobius strip symbolizing the continuity of life and our relationship with our environment. The blue is for clean water, the white is for fresh air, and the green is for a healthy and beautiful plants and trees. And I think it's just lovely. So I hope you've enjoyed today's presentations. We have one more Lunch and Learn tomorrow, and we'd love for you to join us. The topic is going to be on carbon sinks, which I think Jackie mentioned, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I hope you can come.
Thanks, Brenna. That was great. And then I just thought we would open it up to questions or conversation about climate in any form you want, either climate activism or something else that's on your mind. You're welcome to take yourself off mute if you want to speak. Or you could put a question in the chat would be another thing. Here, I have a question here. If I could, people could use reactions too. Is how many people here take regular climate actions on legislation, something beyond individual, some kind of action that has to do with communal support of a larger issue or project or policy? Okay, I see Christy and Margaret. Anybody else want to raise a hand? Christy, you want to tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, sure. Actually, right now I'm taking a course provided by Terra.do. And I regularly look at 350. I love signing petitions and things like that. It's pretty easy to do. And today I'll just let you know about something cool I came across, which was a website where we can all go to our grocery stores, which we do pretty frequently, and look at the refrigerants that are used in their refrigeration section. And so I can put that in in the chat if anybody wants to be a citizen investigator.
That would be great if you could do that, because of course, you know, if you're a reader of Project Drawdown, refrigerants are one of the greenhouse gases. Some of them are, and how they're created is super important to protecting our climate. So there's a lot of voluntary action on reforming refrigerants, but it's a neat idea to see who's got the cleanest refrigerators. So, and I just saw something flash through chat. Colin, would you like to say what you put in the chat?
Sure, I was just curious if anyone had contacted their city council to ask how much money had been spent annually for the past 10 years on each mode of travel. So pedestrian versus bicycling versus public transit versus private vehicles.
That is a super great question, and it's a great way for, you know, just to put that thought in a city council's head. And you see Brenna there writing away, because Brenna is a member of the Lafayette Environmental Task Force. And that's another thing that just about anybody here can do that really makes a difference, is to join an advisory board, work to be a climate advocate for your city or some local organization. They're always looking for volunteers to fill positions. Oh, sorry for the background there. What next? Anybody else? I don't know that we've asked that question of our cities, Colin, but that's super interesting, because we do meet with them regularly and we lobby them regularly. And that's a good question to ask at the county level too, to ask our supervisors. Brenna, anything you want to add, or Lisa?
I think Oli put something in the chat as well about the work she's done as a climate activist. I don't know if Oli wants to mention that, or you want to read that out.
Yeah, Oli, you want to take yourself off mute?
Yeah, hi. I am Mr. Bicycle. I ride my bicycle everywhere. I don't own a car. That, however, is an individual behavior. It's not a climate action that involves everybody. However, inviting others to ride bicycles is my hobby. And I do that by attending public meetings and asking that our public officials create a network of bicycle lanes and shoulders on our public streets, so that people who are not willing to go out and fight with the cars for a corner of the public street can actually ride their bicycle. The national average automobile trip length, which is only 3 miles.
Mm-hmm. I think that's great. And it is also really important, because those of us who take public transportation know how hard it is, that last mile problem, right? That getting from your home to the BART station or the bus stop or from your office, it's really difficult. And bike lanes make it a lot safer. Lisa, why don't you go ahead? Oh, you're on mute, Lisa.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out for people as well, I'm just dropping into chat another way to you know, to the point that that Colin was making, is most of the cities are working on either general plans or climate action plans. The county right now, an unincorporated county of Contra Costa, is working on their climate action plan. I've just dropped that into chat, and they're actually going to be doing a lot of public feedback meetings where you can send them letters, and it's quite a lot to read through, but you can pick out the area of interest. So if you're interested in transportation, or you're interested in active transportation like cycling, you can take a look at what the county is suggesting they're going to do, and then make comment on that, whether you're pro or you know, you've got some areas they could improve on. And most cities are doing similar things. So if you look at your city and go to the website of the city and see if they've got a sustainability action plan or a climate action plan that they're working on or they're updating, and see if you can get involved in that, because that's a great way to impact your local city work that's being done and give feedback. Walnut Creek just, for example, finished their sustainability action plan, and that was just made public, a final version of that. And they do have some information in there about the work that they're planning to do around cycling and bicycle paths around the city. So it's just a really good resource to see what's going on in your local environment.
Okay, well, in closing, I just want to say we hope you'll sign up for the 350 Contra Costa newsletter. And if you're interested in getting more involved, please email us and we'll reach back out to you. We do need people from cities all over the county in order to reach the officials in their own cities. So we could use as much help as we can get, and you can make a difference. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great presentation.